Most of us know Alcatraz Island as one of America's most famous prisons. Located about 2 kilometers off the San Francisco shore, it has been immortalized in movie classics such as The Rock and Escape from Alcatraz. Alcatraz is high on the list of must-sees for visitors to San Francisco, and it regularly attracts over 1 million tourists each year to the island, which sits ominously in San Francisco Bay. One can't help but think of its history when looking at it, imagining who was imprisoned there and who was crazy enough to attempt an escape. Alcatraz Prison closed down in 1963 after 29 years of operation. When it was active, it housed some of America's most notorious and dangerous criminals. Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, and Robert the Birdman Stroud all called Alcatraz home during various stints at the California lockup. These days, it serves as no more than a major tourist attraction for visitors to the Bay Area, with over 5,000 people visiting the Rock in peak season. Alcatraz's time as a penal island, however, actually stretches as far back as the 19th century. It was first discovered by the Spanish explorer Juan Manuel de Ayala in 1775. He named it Isla de los Alcatraces, or Island of the Pelicans, because of the native pelicans resting on the island. Alcatraz was then sold to the United States in 1849, and was soon transformed into a military prison. Island prisons have historically been a go-to for governments looking to clamp down on some troublesome convicts. France had its notorious Devil's Island prison off the northern coast of South America, which kept a whole range of inmates until it closed in 1952. Sydney in Australia started off as a convict colony, and the worst of the worst were locked up on Cockatoo Island in Sydney Harbor. From the late 1850s, Alcatraz was used for military prisoners from the American Civil War and the Spanish-American War, and any Native Americans who were accused of opposing land and property laws. A 600-cell prison was eventually built, and in 1932, the U.S. Army finally agreed to hand over Alcatraz to the federal government. In 1933, Alcatraz opened as a maximum security prison, and many of America's most problematic and dangerous criminals made it their new home. The island lockup's formidable location meant that those with a predilection for escaping from custody were often shipped off to Alcatraz, and anyone who's done a tour of Alcatraz can't help but imagine what it would have been like trying to escape. Apart from the fact that it was heavily guarded by officers in towers, dealing with the Pacific Ocean was a serious and usually deadly challenge. Anyone who made it to the water not only had to swim 2 kilometers to land, but they also had to overcome freezing temperatures and deadly currents. Not surprisingly, most of Alcatraz's guests opted against escaping. The prisoners who were desperate enough to attempt escape had woeful success rates. A total of 36 men tried escaping from the Rock. Of these, most were either caught, surrendered, shot, or confirmed drowned. Only 3 managed to escape without capture. Whether they actually made it to shore or not, never been found out. It remains a mystery. Alcatraz continued to run as a maximum security prison until 1963, when the federal government decided to shut it down. So, why did Alcatraz close down? And why did it become a prison? Alcatraz primarily closed down because of its location and the forces of nature. It was too expensive to run, and the salt water was wearing it away. But the expense of running and upkeeping Alcatraz is often overlooked. Firstly, its location means that it has no freshwater supplies. When Alcatraz was operating as a prison, freshwater had to be shipped to the island at enormous costs. Over 1 million gallons of water were required weekly in order for the prison island to function. Not to mention the constant shipments of food, fuel, and supplies to the 2-kilometer outpost. At its height of occupancy, Alcatraz was home to about 250 inmates, making the endless transporting of water and supplies cost the prison 3 times more to operate than a regular United States prison. And that was just the stuff coming in. Wasted sewage also had to be disposed of, often by boats and ships. A power supply building also had to be constructed in 1939 and served as the island's main power source during its operational period. Added to this were the wear and tear inflicted upon the island and its structures by fierce winds and erosive salt water. Chunks of the island gradually began to crumble into the sea, and buildings needed continual treatment for the damage done by the sea and the salt air. All of this constant maintenance and growing operational expenditure finally it capsized. It became too costly. The federal government decided that it would simply be cheaper to build a new prison than to continue with Alcatraz. Now, the actual estimated cost was around $3 to $5 million just for restoration and maintenance work to keep Alcatraz open. And that wasn't including daily operating costs. To give you an idea, in 1960, the daily cost per person on Alcatraz was $10.10, compared with $3 at an Atlanta penitentiary. And so, in March 1963, Alcatraz was shut down as a prison. It remained largely uninhabited and unused for the next decade. There were proposals to build monuments on it, and some even suggested building a hotel or a shopping mall on it. In November 1969, Alcatraz started to buzz again when Native American activists occupied the island to claim it as Native American land. They were acting as the Indians of all tribes, and their aim was to raise awareness surrounding their plight and to use the island as a cultural and educational center. This was at a time when social unrest and the fight for civil rights was at their height in America. The Alcatraz occupation gained considerable backing from the public, and many flocked to the rock in support. However, the situation gradually became unmanageable as the protests attracted the wrong kinds of crowds. Fires broke out. Violence and vandalism were on the rise, and the Native Americans lost control of the situation. In June 1971, federal marshals were sent to Alcatraz to evict the occupiers and shut it down. Alcatraz remained in a transient state for the next few years, with damaged buildings and property going unrepaired and unsupervised. But then in 1972, the Golden Gate National Recreation Area was set up, and Alcatraz was added to the list of attractions. Reformations and renovations were soon underway, and in 1973, Alcatraz was open to the public for tours. It became an instant hit, pulling in tourists from all around the world. Today, visitors can walk through the prison area and step into the cells once occupied by some of America's most feared prisoners. On a typically sunny day in picturesque San Francisco, the boat ride over to Alcatraz is a great way to take in the city. Once you step off and remind yourself that hardened killers used to share this very space, that cheery chatter might subside. There's just something about this slightly sinister, lone island in the middle of a bay that really captures attention. Alcatraz's colorful past nonetheless means that it ranks right up there with America's most visited and recognized tourist sites.